we're breaking down how to make a Bryson Tiller soulful trap beat. And I'll let you know right now, it ain't that hard. It's because for this beat, we're using a sample. So let's get down into this breakdown. All right, y'all, here's our FLP right here. This is pretty much the beat fully arranged and laid out, but we're gonna get into everything one at a time, and we're gonna start with the sample. All right, so here's the sample that I picked out. It's just something that I got off of a Splice, but you can pretty much get samples anywhere. If you wanna go for any paid ones like I do, I use Tracklibs, Splice. Those are both two really good ones. If you don't wanna do that though, and you're running more on a budget, you can just go on YouTube, type in for any like free for profit samples, or even using samplet.io is really good. You can get a bit more technical, looking for something more specific to your liking. And even find samples that could possibly be clearance free, that you don't even have to go and like clear yourself. So keep that in mind. But for today and this beat, we're going to be using the one that I got off Splice here, and that sounds like this. Okay, so boom. Now that we have the sample, the first thing that I like to do with making beats is I like to make the actual drop part of itself. So with the sample is what I always start out with. I just go in, and with Serato, it's easy. I'll just click find samples and it'll throw chops all around the place until I find something that I like. But for the case of right now, I already got some laid out, and this is what my first chop sounds like. All right, so that's pretty much going to be the chop, at least for the main part of the beat. After I get that laid out, I like to start adding in my drums. So the first thing I start with is the snare pattern, and I just have a basic one here with some counter snares, which sounds like this. After I get the snare pattern in, I go ahead and start filling in with a hi-hat pattern, and it's just a basic two-step with a couple rolls. The thing with beats like this is that I like to not only adjust the velocity just to give it more feel. If you look close at some of these placements, you're gonna notice that it's a bit like off of the lines. And now it's also gonna give it a more humanized feel, so that way it's not like so robotic and just redundant like how most beats are nowadays. So the hi-hat pattern is going to sound like this. All right, and then the only thing left of our drums before we get into the 808s is just the crash, and then everything else together, and it sounds like this. All right, y'all, and then for this beat, I chose 3 808s. The patterns themselves aren't overly complex, but for the 808s themselves, I have one that sounds like this. And then another one that sounds like this. And then finally, the third one, which sounds like this. All right, and then for all three of them, like I mentioned, I have a pretty basic pattern laid out. It's just what follows with the root notes of the sample chop laid out. And then the pattern for all three of those sounds like this. All right, y'all, and then pretty much at that point, we have the pattern for the loop on our drop, and everything together on that sounds like this. All right, y'all, and typically after I find the pattern that I like and I'm ready to start arranging, I'll first throw everything from that pattern into a mixer channel and start adding the effects, start adding the master, and adjusting the volume so it sounds good. To do that quickly, instead of having to go and scroll in with numbers, you can just do a Control L for Windows, and that'll quickly throw that into the mixer channel right here. If you're on Mac, you can do Command L, and that'll do the same thing. All right, after I have everything thrown into the mixer channel, I like to organize it, have things going into their own categories. So this first section over here is going to be for my melodies, this middle one's going to be for my drums, and then the last one's going to be for the 808s or the basses. I first like to start off with the melodies, just to make sure that it's cleaned up, has no low end that the basses overlap with, and if I wanted to add any texture, reverbs, anything like that, to just give it a bit more flavor. You can also use Fruity EQ too, which you can practically just do the same thing. You typically want to cut out between the 160 to 170 range. That typically just gets rid of all the low end that might interfere with your 808s. After that, I gave it some reverb with Neoverb. You don't want to go nuts with it, so just keep it to like a minimum. I have mine usually around 18 to 22%, and that's usually fine. But you can adjust the taste. After that, on the bottom here, I have another EQ. This one's W495, and I like the low-high contour preset on here, so I just throw that, and that just makes it sound a bit better, in my opinion. After all that's added, I'll just throw in a quick compression, and then I'll route it to my mid melody bus, which will get rid of some of that middle end. That way, if an artist were to hop on this beat, it won't be as interfering with their voice. After that, I have another compressor in here. This one's just to clean it up a little bit, bring up those unnoticed notes. And then I have a Fruity stereo enhancer, which just gives it a bit more room. After that, I have one more route for the overall melody bus, and that's to give it any final EQs and compression, and then that's practically it. We then head over to the master, where we have our final EQs, compressions, and for my beats, I like to throw on a soft clipper. That's just to give it more oomph in our bass and our kicks. And with that, we'll finally get everything leveled out with our limiter. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the mixing portion. There's nothing added to my 808s. I just have those adjusted as needed. Same thing with the drums. So after I got that set up, I started arranging. I gave it an intro. The intro itself, if we go back to the sample, is just going to be the second half of the sample that I used. So it's just going to be... into our drop. I have the same thing for the bridge, but just so it wasn't so redundant, I added a global EQ here, and pretty much all I'm doing is giving it that effect where it feels like it's like going underwater or like you're holding a pillow over the beat, right? So with our EQ right here, as you can see, if we open up Fruity EQ 2, we have what looks like an untouched EQ, but what I did is I went to this knob right here, clicked on the automation knob, moved this around, and then you can go in here, create automation clip, and it'll throw some automations that you can just adjust to your liking. I already did that, and that sounds like this. And then boom. And if you notice, I have a little gross beat too on the second half when the drums come back in as the EQ is slowly opening the beat back up. And it's just a stutter or a repeater, whatever you want to call it. If we go to our melody, the gross beats right here, I went to the stutter section and I just used stutter 7. And that's pretty much all it's doing, is just repeating that second half of the bar, which sounds really nice. That's the only time it comes up. Other than that, we just go back to the regular drop. And if we scroll a little bit more, we have a couple more like transitions, and that's just to give less redundancy within the beat. Once we're done with that, and we finally get to the end, the outros, I typically like to use the last part of the sample if I am doing that. In this case, I'm pretty much doing the reverse. For the intro, I'm using the second half of the sample. For the outro, I'm using the first half. So if we go to Serato here and we check that out, it'll pretty much just look like this. And that's pretty much it. And instead of like fading out with volume, I have it fading out with the EQ like I did earlier within the bridge. And that pretty much wraps up the beat. It's nothing too crazy, pretty simple, but it sounds good. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up the beat today. If you guys have any other artist suggestions that you want me to try out next, or any other ways of doing it, or even any suggestions on how I can improve this beat or just change it overall, you can let me know in the comments. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching, and this is the final beat.